Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm Patrick Masad, the Commissioner of the PAAB. I'm thrilled to welcome you all to this Q&A session on the upcoming enhancements to the PAAB pre-clearance process. As you've read in preparation for this session, there's a lot to look forward to in the upcoming months. To help you be confident that you've consumed all information relating to this session, we've created a single web page that lists all pertinent documents and tools. This web page is called Summary List of ARO and Submission Resources. At the time of this recording, it's the first item you'll see when you click on the navigational menu called Resources from any page on our website. The recording for today's session will be added to that list of resources by Tuesday, May 24th. In a few moments, PAAB reviewer Danielle Anthony will provide a brief summary of what's to come. She'll then answer your questions with the assistance of Jennifer Carroll, PAAB's Senior Reviewer of Communications, and Sabrina Hack from our File Coordinator team. You can ask a question at any point during the session by typing it into the Q&A field. We ask that you please identify your name and your company in the question. We'll include that information when we present the question. Prior to handing the session off to Danielle, I'd like to take a brief moment to discuss how we got here. In April of 2021, we launched an industry-wide survey to help us determine the interest level in and the operational feasibility of an accelerated review offering. The survey results indicated a strong appetite for the service at the proposed price points. Qualitative data from open text responses also helped shape the offering and the manner in which it'll be rolled out. The survey was followed by the issuance of a features detailer document in November of 2021. In this detailer document, we elaborated on the same fee structure that we've evaluated in the survey, with the addition of refinements based on insights derived from the survey data. These enhancements included the introduction of minor updates, a complementary upgrade to the next ARO urgency level for APS with little new content, and a sliding supplementary length fee that scales upwards with the amount of new content in the APS. It also included new offerings, such as the ability to make modular submissions and iterative submissions. While this feature detailer document explained the what, the guidance submission process and format requirements document, which we published in April of this year, explained the how. ARO and some of the new formats, some of the new submission formats would ultimately require a multi-pronged approach to increasing review capacity. We've therefore grown the review team substantially in preparation for ARO, and we've modernized the submission requirements as outlined in the submission process guidance document. In April, we also published an advisory outlining the new criteria for series fee submissions. These will come into effect once we launch ARO and the new submission formats. While these criteria outline new boundaries around the types of submissions that would have traditionally been granted a series fee, you'll have the ability to benefit from this lower series fee pricing for new submission types, such as minor updates, modular submissions, and for iterative submissions. Please note that at initial launch, only a subset of APS will be applicable to the accelerated reviews. This list was designed to balance both of the following critical but potentially conflicting objectives of the pilot's initial phase. Those objectives are as follows. Firstly, to allow for the volume and variety of accelerated pre-clearance submissions to be sufficient to pressure test our policies, our practices, our procedures, and technology so as to generate data that will guide fine-tuning. Secondly, to ensure that our resources are not overburdened during the initial growing stages in a manner that could compromise either review quality or the success of the pilot. We'll be monitoring implementation carefully during the pilot rollout to make data-driven decisions on timing of additions to the list of APS types. We'll give you advance warning prior to expanding that list. I just also wanted to point out that the new submission formats, including modular submissions, iterative submissions, and minor updates, could potentially apply to any APS type right from the start of the pilot. Having outlined how we've gotten to this exciting point, I'd like to now pass things on to Danielle Anthony for a summary of what's to come and for your Q&A. Take it away, Danielle.
Thanks, Patrick, and thanks to everyone who is attending today. As Patrick mentioned, we have a lot of exciting things happening at PAAB in the very near future. One of the major ones being the ARO pilot. And what's going to make this launch a success is helping you have the opportunity to ask any questions you might have, or even raise some considerations we haven't yet thought of that we will keep in mind during the launch. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit of what's new at PAAB. As I'm sure you're aware, we have sent out a number of new documents lately, with one of the larger, more substantial ones being the new guidance on submission process and format requirements. It's been quite a while since the original document was created, and since then a lot has changed in the pharma landscape. The new document contains updates related to our upgraded e-file system, new submission types like modular and iterative, and more to help make the submission process as clear and streamlined as possible. As we get into the ARO launch, we really want to make sure that we're all on the same page so that when you do need something in a 2-day or 4-day or 7-day turnaround, you're not going to be slowed down by back and forths related to the quality of your submission. In addition to the new guidance, we're launching the AROs that Patrick just spoke about. And this is intended to launch in early July, which is coming up very quickly. So we're hoping we can answer as many of your questions as possible today to make this launch as smooth as possible for all of us. So before we jump into the question and answer period, I just wanted to touch on some of the features of note as they relate to the ARO pilot launch. In July, you're going to have the option to select your desired urgency level for your submission. The standard pathway that you are accustomed to is still going to be available, but you're also going to have the option to select ARO 2, ARO 4, ARO 7, ARO 10. And as you probably have guessed or know from reading the documents, the number at the end of the ARO name will correspond to the turnaround time for the first response. So for example, if you choose ARO 4, you're going to receive your first letter in 4 business days. All of the ARO levels are benefiting from the 2-day turnaround instead of the standard pathway 3-day turnaround you're used to. And all ARO levels are going to have access to our messenger functionality. So the messenger functionality is brand new to us and exclusive to the AROs. And it's really intended to help you resolve those independent critical elements to the piece in between submissions, I should say formal letters, by communicating directly with your reviewer through this messenger functionality. So this is new, and I'm sure there's quite a few questions about how that will work. We're also introducing some new submission types, namely modular submissions, iterative, and we have updated our series submission criteria, as well as the introduction of pieces with minor updates. And lastly, we've introduced a new fee structure, and this is really to ensure that the fees are transparent, fair, and link the value that you're going to receive to the resources we need on our end to meet your needs. So with that, I hope I have jogged your memory on some of the broader topics of interest, and I'm going to hand it over to you to ask your burning questions. So as a quick reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A box, and Jen will help moderate, and the team and I are here to answer your questions as best we can. So don't be shy and ask away.
There is already one question, Danielle. The standard pathway turnaround for initial submissions is 10 days for APS review, correct?
That is still correct, yes. So everything you know about the standard pathway holds true.
Okay, so how could agencies provide clients with an accurate project estimated time up front, not knowing what the PAAB fee will be until the time of submission?
So I assume you're speaking from a budgetary perspective instead of a timeline perspective. And that is why we have introduced the fee calculator. So that is a calculator we created, and you can currently access it in the top nav bar of our PAAB.ca website. And we do understand that the new fee structure is a little bit more complicated than we're used to, which is why we did create this. So you can put in your project specific information and you will be given an estimate for what your project will cost. And we did this specifically to help with budgeting purposes. So the one thing I will say is that the more accurate and specific you can be with the information you are inputting into the calculator, the more accurate the price output will be. So always account for potential variability, but again, the more specific you can be, the better, and the more specific our output would be.
And Danielle, can you tell us what the difference between ARO 10 and the standard submission is?
Yeah, absolutely. So while the first turnaround time, so the turnaround time for initial submission will be the same as the standard pathway, so that 10 days. The benefit of the ARO 10 is that you will then have the 2-day turnaround for subsequent revisions instead of the 3-day turnaround that the standard pathway has. And you'll also benefit from the use of the messenger functionality.
And how long will the pilot be? And when is ARO opening up to all submission types?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The pilot does not have a firm end date. This is something we've always intended to grow as we learn more about how the program is being used, how the arrows are being used, how the messenger functionality is being used. As Patrick mentioned, it's currently a small list of submission types because we're test the system. We want to make sure that the policies and protocols we have, as well as the upgrades to the e-file system, are going to withstand the pressure of this new pathway to acceptance, and make sure that our resources are on track to balance that. So as we get data from the initial launch, it may be a few months, it may be 6 months, it may be longer. But as we gain that learning, we will start to make modifications, and we do have plans to open it up to more and more submission types.
And I guess kind of along that line, Brendan from McCann is asking, are there different kinds of submissions? Will they appear in different spaces, or will they still all be on the same dashboard, all collected together? So what, from an agency side, can they expect to see from a filing of their APS perspective?
It's my understanding, and Sabrina or Patrick Hoffman, if I am incorrect, it's my understanding that everything will still appear similarly. Our submission form will be different. We have not finalized that yet, but your submission form will capture what ARO level you are intending to take advantage of, and everything will appear in your list as usual. So you can sort by, due date or whatever the case may be, to keep things organized. There won't be different buckets. The intention is to really keep it as simple and streamlined as possible. Patrick or Sabrina, do you have anything to add on that question?
Not really. As far as I know, the dashboard will be the same, but again, with the tweaks showing the different turnaround times. So the dashboard will look the same.
Yeah, I think ultimately we're not trying to reinvent the wheel entirely. We're not trying to throw everybody completely off by having a brand new experience. It'll just be some changes to the submission form so that we can all keep track of what service you've requested, and the same ways of organizing will apply.
And can you just explain the difference between ARO 10 and the standard pathway?
Yeah, so I think I just covered that, but happy to reiterate that the turnaround time is the same. It's the 10 days, but you will benefit from the 2-day turnaround with ARO 10, as well as the use of the messenger functionality that aren't part of that standard pathway.
Awesome. I can see here Can ARO 2 or 4 be selected if, for instance, this is a website content, so for lengthy projects?
So currently we have the caveat, both in our calculator and our documents, that an ARO 2 should be less than 10 pages of new content. So if this is an update to a website and there's minimal changes, so there's less than 10 pages of that new content, or 5 or fewer references requiring a detailed assessment, we can consider it. If you are in doubt, and this is, a 60-page brand new website, that at this time would not be eligible for ARO. But if you're in doubt, we recommend you reach out to our file coordinators and we can sort of take a look at the file and see if it would be a good fit for ARO, I should say. The last thing we want is somebody submitting it, anticipating a turnaround that's 2 days, and finding out after the fact that it's not eligible. So we do recommend for those larger projects to reach out, but to consider the fact that it should be 10 pages or fewer of new content.
And along that lines, can you give us just a couple other examples that wouldn't be acceptable with ARO at this time?
So I suppose I'll more so flip that and give you what would be considered for ARO at this time. So we're looking at things like time-sensitive announcements, perhaps formulary coverage, minor updates. A minor update is a change in a presentation from a previously accepted presentation. And those minor updates are considered for pieces where you do not need or want to extend that expiry date. So I'm sure you've read that in our features detailer, but we would consider minor updates at this time for ARO. Updates with little new content. So those are those pieces with less than 2 pages of new content. Keep in mind, that's not the total page count. We're just talking about new content. We are accepting launch pieces for products with a Health Canada interim order or accelerated priority review, and patient pieces, as well as print pieces that are being digitized. So those are the ones we are currently accepting. If it falls outside of those, or if you're not sure if it falls into one of those, again, we would recommend reaching out with the specifics of your project, and we can kind of help guide you to what services are available.
Perfect. And kind of along the same veins, Kim has asked, you mentioned that you're adding a new category called minor updates, which you were just speaking about.
Yeah.
Will the same 10-day first review turnaround time exist for minor updates, or will it always follow an accelerated timeline by default?
Those by default would not follow an accelerated timeline. We would still ask you to pick your desired urgency level, whether it's standard, 10, ARO 10, ARO 7, ARO 4, ARO 2. That said, we will always complete a file as quickly as we can. What the AROs assure you is that you will get those within, at maximum, that time frame that you have selected. So rest assured, if we can get it to it faster, we absolutely will. Certainly, the smaller the change, the easier it is to review. However, the main benefit of the minor update is more around the fee reduction. If you wish to have it accelerated, we would ask you to choose the appropriate ARO pathway.
And will these potential changes to ARO affect extension requests, or will that follow the same process? And that's being asked by Brendan at McCann.
I suppose I'm not entirely clear on what aspect of extension requests would be.
So currently we will, under a set number of set restrictions, will allow for extensions of files given, a PM change has just happened, or they're changing company ownership of the product, so on and so forth. There's a list of extensions. Will putting something through ARO affect the ability to still have an extension request, or will the extension request follow the same pathway they always did, regardless of the way in which they're submitted?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, they will still follow the same pathway. There won't be any effect to your ability to request an extension as long as they meet our criteria for an extension request.
Perfect. And Valerie from Outpost 379 asked, what should we expect for turnaround times from the messenger functionality? And can it work as a discussion format if there is a follow-up question or a response in Messenger?
Yeah, I think the idea is to have that live discussion and really try to help you resolve that independent element of the piece. In terms of turnaround time, in the guidance document, we currently have it as a 1 business day turnaround from the last message you sent. So currently we have not set a restriction on how many messages you can send sort of in one round of revision. But if you are sending more than one and you're sending them at different times, that 1 business day clock resets at the time of the latest message sent. So we would recommend, just for time savings, to try to coordinate all of your comments at once, just to make the most of your time, but you will get a response within 1 business day.
Okay, and if a file was submitted through the standard review process and then the timeline becomes urgent, will PAAB still try to do an expedited review for the request? That's coming from Donna Morris.
Yeah, so that is a good question. Because of the introduction of the AROs, we are no longer able to accommodate rush requests out of a sense of fairness. We have folks that are paying for and requesting their urgency levels. It would be unfair to then take, random requests for a rush. So out of a sense of fairness, we would not be accepting rush requests any longer. That said, as I mentioned before, we will always do our best to expedite, well, not expedite necessarily, but turn around pieces as quickly as we possibly can.
Awesome. And Amy asked, can we expect advance notice if our ARO files were submitted incorrectly under the wrong ARO type, or just with not all of the completed documents? So if it doesn't qualify for a specific ARO type selected, will they be notified quickly, or will there be a delay? What timelines could they expect from them?
I will probably defer to Sabrina on this, but I would say our file coordinators are always working as quickly as they can to address each file in their bin. Sabrina, did you have any additional comments?
Well, we'll continue to assess all submissions, and based on the information that we're given, if there are any problems, we'll certainly send the file back and you can make your changes and resubmit. So we'll just continue to do our usual assessment up front.
Yeah, and I would also add that when in doubt, if you have a piece that you are unsure if it qualifies for a particular ARO or ARO at all during the pilot phase where our list of APSs are a bit smaller, please reach out in advance if you think this is something you want to take advantage of so that there are no unpleasant surprises at the last moment.
And Danielle, can people expect the timeline for a standard review to still be 3 days for revisions, regardless of whether they've submitted through ARO or not?
So for the standard pathway, the maximum amount of time you will wait for your revision is 3 days. Again, we'll get to it as quickly as we can within those 3 days. For ARO, the revision turnaround time is 2 days. So you have that assurance that you will get faster. It applies beyond just the initial turnaround time.
And is there a maximum of launch tactics that we can submit for a launch of a new indication or product?
I don't think we have set a maximum at this time. Certainly if it becomes problematic in terms of volume during the launch, that may be something we have to reassess, but I don't believe we have a maximum amount at this time.
Is there a published checklist for the minimum standard of different types of questions?
Sorry, could you repeat that one?
Is there a published checklist for the minimum standards for different types of materials?
Sure. So we actually have a lot of fresh guidance in our new guidance on submission process and format requirements. There are 2 checklists within it, one regarding initial submission and referencing, and another with follow-up information for revisions, as well as guidance on what is required for each particular submission type. So different things will be required for modular, then iterative, then a series submission. But it is all in that new guidance document. And again, if you have concerns or we have missed something, certainly let us know and we can look into it.
And can a modular submission contain content that has not been reviewed before? Example, a mix of a library content with net new content.
Amount of net new content we would allow in a modular submission is very limited. So perhaps a subject line or an email footer, something of that nature. The whole idea behind modular submissions is that it's a reduced cost because it should be a reduced effort on PAAB's part when conducting the review. And that is because the modular library has already in theory been assessed. We've looked at each presentation individually and assessed its acceptability. And really what we're supposed to be looking for in those modular submissions are things around context, placement, flow, things of that nature. So because of that reduced review load, that's what the cost savings is attributed to. If we start adding a bunch of new content, it really changes that. So we would discourage against large amounts of new content and ask that it be minimized to sort of small elements of the piece, like an email subject line or like a footer. Nothing of vast substance to the piece.
Awesome. I'm going to try and group a couple messenger questions together.
Sure.
So Paul from Roche has asked, messenger functionality will only be available for ARO. The standard submissions will still continue to follow the same channels that they did in the past.
Yes, that's correct. The messenger functionality is only for AROs and standard submission will stay as is.
Perfect. And along the same lines, Kim has asked, how will the messenger functionality work? So can you just give us a little bit of a quick overview? Can people expect to get an email notification? And do they have to schedule a time to send these messages or receive the messages, or how will that work?
I am not 100% sure on the specifics of the technical details, whether you'll receive an email notification or some other form of notification. It won't be bound to time. The only relevance the timing of your message will have is when you can expect a response. So you might be working after hours, but you should consider the fact that the timing will be one full business day starting the next day, because it was sent sort of after the previous business day. Patrick, did you have any thoughts on the functionality?
Yeah, from a notification perspective, it'd be the same notification that you get when you get a letter response from PAAB. So yeah, that'll be very much the same. I presume that, and I'm not 100% sure on the client end, but I'm presuming that that's a feature you can modify on your end, whether it be the whether I get email notifications or it's just a notification I get in e-files next time I'm in e-files. If I'm not frequently in e-files, I probably want to make sure I've set it so that I'm getting email notifications. But yeah, that's the idea. And the messenger the messenger functionality will be integrated directly on the copy deck. So don't imagine some sort of external or other message, like literally on the copy deck or on the letter. I have a question about the PAAB letter or whatever. I'm annotating that letter, and within that annotation, I'm typing in my question. The reviewer is going to get a notification that you've done so. Once he or she responds, you'll get the notification that that response is available for you.
And that transitions quite nicely into, will PAAB be seeking feedback during the pilot? And what is the anticipated time frame for introduction of ARO and all APS tags?
Yes, absolutely. We will be seeking feedback. You can provide it informally as you see fit. If you have a thought or an idea, please reach out to us. We are happy to hear it. We will also be conducting a survey throughout the pilot towards when we feel like we've gathered enough information to seek more formal feedback. As for when we will be growing our list, we do not have a timeline on that currently. It's really going to depend on how the pilot goes, what we can glean from that, how many changes need to be made. So that is something that we will certainly update you on as we gain that information and gain those insights. But currently there is no hard date to say when we will open it up to all submissions or even add submissions.
And there are a couple questions on this, so I'm going to try and blend them together. but the highlights, so pickup content, and the blue highlights for series content, mandatory, or can they use different colors as long as they provide a legend? And along also the same lines of, for minor updates, do they have to highlight as per the document, or could they just quote the e-file as they've been doing in the past? So maybe a little bit more clarification on the submission requirements.
Sure. We specifically added those colors in the document because we were finding in many submissions that the highlighting was getting a little bit complicated. So multiple colors, showing different rounds, and sometimes colors that are actually very hard to read copy against. So we decided to go a little bit more standardized, and we would prefer that those colors are used, not just from a reviewer perspective, but our admin team is being trained and has been trained to look for certain colors to help with a quick assessment of fee, determining if the percent pickup looks accurate and things of that nature. So it really is preferable to follow the guidance in the updated guidance on submissions document, just for a multitude of reasons, from visibility to review purposes, as well as assisting in admin processing those files quickly and identifying the elements that they have been trained to identify.
Perfect. And for types of qualifying APS, including those where there are less than 2 pages of modification, does that mean less than 2 pages worth of new content or content change? So pages impacted or overall content within the piece?
Overall content within the piece. So we're not saying you need to have 2 pages of consecutive content that's brand new. The way the calculation is actually done is we're not asking you to identify the new content. We're looking at the percent pickup field and multiplying that by the total page count. So it could just be, a sentence on this page, a paragraph on the next page, a couple paragraphs on the following page. We're not expecting you to sit there and try to guesstimate the amount of new content. We have integrated that into our software. So as long as you are as accurate as possible when approximating the percent pickup, and a reminder that picked up content should be identical to previously approved content, we can do that calculation on our end using that percent pickup and the total page count of the piece.
Perfect. And healthcare professional opinions and opinion files are 4-day turnarounds. Will ARO be applicable to healthcare professional opinions too? What can they expect there?
Yes, ARO is. There's a 4-day response available, which is the same as usual, as well as a 2-day response time for an increased fee.
Will the standard opinion fee and turnaround remain?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, the 4-day will be the exact same for that. You just now have the option of a 2-day.
And if I submit originally for a 10-day turnaround, but I want to change it to an ARO to get a faster turnaround or review, can I do that?
That will be, it's not a hard no. That will be dependent on where in the review process it is. It's possible to change to a faster ARO. It would be harder to change to, if you've paid for ARO 2 and the work has already been done, to then say, oh, actually, I would just like standard pathway. So it's absolutely possible. It may be dependent on where the file is or file considerations, but it could be possible, yes.
What would be a situation where we would reach out through messenger functionality versus opening a ticket or scheduling a phone call?
Yeah, so I think we're actually hoping at some point, not right away, baby steps, but that the messenger functionality will eventually replace ticket calls or form the bulk of that sort of intra-round communication, if you will. So really it's not one and the same necessarily, but the messenger functionality is really intended to help solve a critical element of the piece. So you are at a loss about your creative headline. It is something that you can't really proceed with your revision without sort of having an idea of what way you should be going, what could be possible, what might be acceptable. So that would be an example where you could reach out via messenger to say, I'm thinking this, or what if we went down this route, or would this be acceptable, or how about if we change this and move this down here? that could be something you could address via Messenger, and sometimes it will be easier because you're both looking at the same layout. You can draw on the layout, show the reviewer where you're intending to move things to, and things of that nature. So they're both useful, and that is sort of what we are going to find out in the pilot, which is useful for what and how people are using these. But that would be an example of how you could use the Messenger to solve one of those independent elements of your piece.
And just to add to that, keep in mind that the phone call is for clarification purposes, while the instant messenger is intended to be for providing rulings. So while we would be, we're unlikely to provide a ruling on a telephone during a live conversation because, well, we haven't had time to do due diligence on our end and discuss internally if we need to. Whereas with Messenger, there is that ability. That's part of the reason for that 1 day timeline. So you're able to like Danielle said, kind of move a particular chunk of that piece forward, knowing that you have an actual ruling that depends only on how you're going to execute it within the larger piece, as opposed to just a clarification to a question. What did you mean in comment 10, which is what you'd get from a phone call.
Perfect. And what about for time-sensitive announcements and availability announcements? Can the APS also include other content in addition to the availability announcement, or is it restricted strictly to that availability? So could it include other information and promotional?
Yeah, I think ultimately it could, as long as the main message is certainly about the time sensitivity. And again, we would be looking for the overall piece to contain less than 10 pages of new content.
From a submission guidelines perspective, how will the new highlighting requirements apply to multiple rounds of review? So first round, you put previously approved in yellow and the other copy in blue. Round 2, would the approved copy in blue from the round before or yellow from the round before stay? Do I apply it to the copy that wasn't questioned or challenged in the last round? How does that affect multiple rounds of revisions?
Yeah, that's a good question. We would ask that we keep it as simple as possible. You're just highlighting the revised copy at that point, so that we're only reviewing what has been changed based on our letter of revision.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the point there is the consistency stays, that whatever is initially highlighted yellow and blue stays yellow and blue throughout the whole. No, nothing else gets that yellow and blue highlighting applied to it throughout that review process, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
For launch material, where the product is Health Canada interim order or accelerated priority review, does the 2 pre-ONC launch max pieces still apply?
They do still apply at this time. I don't know if there's any plans to change that in the near future. So for right now, I would say that still applies.
Okay, and if we submit, let's say 10 submissions under ARO 2 on the same day for the same brand, will they all be granted the same quick timeline, or will there be a limit per brand per day? How many can go under ARO?
Yeah, so currently we don't have a maximum of submissions based on brand or type or agency or per reviewer for that matter. That is, again, something we are going to determine throughout the pilot, depending on how it's being used. If everybody is submitting ARO 2s and we're being barraged by ARO 2s every day, we may have to think about something like that. But at this point, we don't know. We don't know what the most popular submission type is. Based on the survey, it was looking like it would be ARO 4. But again, this is part of the learning that we are going to do throughout the pilot through our data collection. And if there are parameters or limits that need to be put in place, that is a decision that will be data driven, and we will certainly communicate it to you prior to implementing.
And will the ticket form still be maintained for the standard submissions?
I believe so, because we are not doing away with the ticketing system. So it will remain as is. If you wish to open a ticket, that is still an option that you can choose.
And we have a question. Can you confirm whether we should expect any maintenance or technical issues during the changes to the portal and while the updates are being made?
I certainly hope not. We are doing our absolute best to test and refine the software prior to launch, which is why it's, July and not tomorrow. However, with any new launch, there may be the occasional glitch, and if something like that happens, we will obviously do our best to resolve it quickly and modify things as necessary if there's any major impact to submissions.
And of course, the migration from the development environment to the live environment would be done off hours, just to minimize the risk of that sort of interruption. Again, you can never guarantee that there's no interruption, as Danielle said, but we've planned this out to help mitigate that risk as much as possible.
Cross your fingers for us.
Okay. The new guidance for straight renewals of previously accepted submissions indicates that layouts may be submitted. If this is the case for a straight renewal, do they have to provide the English and the French layout, or is English layout?
We would prefer to see the French as well, just because it would be considered a replacement to the copy draft. Again, we review French for copy only, so we won't be commenting on the placement or positioning of anything in the French. And again, just as a flag, the layout is acceptable as long as it's copy correct. So it should match the approved copy draft from the originally accepted file. So yes, please provide both English and French layouts if you are only providing layouts for your renewals.
For our website, do we need to also submit a layout for mobile view in addition to our regular PC view?
Yes, so nothing has changed from that regard. You're still expected to submit desktop, layout, tablet, any of those different breakpoints. What's new about some of our new submission types is that now you can accomplish this in one e-file. So that would be a great example of an iterative submission where there's a minor change. Your copy is exactly the same, but the difference is the layouts. So you could submit those as an iterative submission, meaning you're having one e-file assigned to all three of those layouts. But there will be the appropriate fees assigned within that e-file. So you'll still be charged your series fee for your, let's say, your tablet and your mobile layout. You will be charged the full fee for the review of the desktop site, but they will all live together in that iterative submission, which is one e-file. It's easier for tracking purposes on our side. I imagine it's easier for tracking purposes on the agency side, as well as submission processes and things of that nature. So yes, those will still be required to be submitted, but that would be a great example of where you could benefit from our reduced series fee and take advantage of the new iterative submission.
If we disagree with a response from a messenger response, what is the process to gain alignment? Would you suggest that those migrate to a call for discussion, or does the current escalation criteria or process remain the same?
That is a good question. Typically, they're intended to help resolve. Patrick, have we thought about what happens if the, I guess, the issue in question can't be resolved via messenger?
Yeah, so the escalation process is exactly as it is for the standard submission process. So in terms of, yes, we've had the back and forth, we've had the telephone conversation with the reviewer. After a response, we still have disagreement with the reviewer. So the reviewers received the entire copy deck or layout. We're still having that disagreement, and we're going to do the escalation with the senior reviewer of pre-clearance services. So that's very much the same. If anything, the nuance or difference is that you may it may become clearer that you may achieve that point of, yeah, we disagree a little earlier, right? Because you've had that chance to have some of that discourse prior to the prior to resubmitting the whole piece. You still have to resubmit the whole piece, get the reviewer's letter, but it may take fewer of those to kind of realize that, hey, we've hit a roadblock. We're not moving forward, and it's now time to it's now time to escalate. But the actual milestones that need to take place are identical to the standard review.
Perfect. And there were just two questions on providing the cost breakdown of ARO and where the fee calculator can be found.
Sure. So I probably will not run through every cost. There's a high amount of variability depending on length of the piece, percent pickup, what type of submission it is. But the fees can be found on our webpage, PAAB.ca. They can be found in the towards the back of the features detailer, which is on that list that Patrick provided. And the fee calculator is in the top nav bar. It's a green button of PAAB.ca, and it says fee calculator.
And also, for what it's worth, if you go to the web page that has the current fee schedule, there's also a link right there as well to the entire fee schedule. So that's both on that resource page we described earlier that has everything, and also on the actual fee schedule page. So it's easy to come across.
I think that is all the questions, but we can maybe give people a minute or two if you don't feel like if you feel like your question got missed at any point, if you want to copy and paste it or retype it into the Q&A, just to make sure we catch everything. Don't see anything coming in.
You are all ARO experts now.
So as we get closer to ARO, we will be looking to give you, more information on what the submission forms will look like, how you can go about that process, and provide any additional training and guidance that you would require in order to feel comfortable getting ready for the kickoff of ARO and being ready to hit the ground running when it does launch. So someone did ask, would it be possible to provide a visual example of highlighting under the new submission guidelines?
Yes, so we have some examples at the back of the guidance on submission documents, but if you are referring to the question that was asked earlier about, the various needs for highlighting sort of coexisting as the piece progresses, we can absolutely look into adding that if that seems to be a point of confusion. Obviously, we appreciate the effort to revise any practices that you weren't currently doing within your agencies. So yeah, if that's something that could be useful, we can absolutely add it, and we will alert you when it is ready.
Would a copy deck just include a desktop first, mobile afterward, or would we submit two separate copy decks with the same file submission?
That's a good question. I would submit the whole package as you've been submitting them. You'll want to indicate which one is the parent file as well as which one are the children files. So let's say mobile and tablet will be the child files, and treat it as you would a normal submission for a mobile. However, highlight that the big difference is obviously going to be the layout, indicate that the copy is 100% similar or identical, I should say, and that it's really the layout that has the iteration of the file.
And are they required to submit them together, or can they choose to submit them separately, desktop first and then mobile?
Yeah, certainly you can submit them separately. The benefit of the iterative submission, though, is the cost savings, knowing that you will likely be developing this website or whatever it is you're developing for various platforms or products, I suppose, you'll likely be completing a mobile at some point or a tablet at some point. So we would recommend, for the best cost savings, to do it together in the form of an iterative submission. You are absolutely not forced to do it that way. If you prefer to split them out, that is your prerogative, absolutely. Okay. Last chance for any outstanding questions before we all head off.
Nothing over here.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Hopefully that was informative and you got some of your questions answered. Certainly, as you chew on what we discussed today, you may come up with more questions. We may come up with more answers. And if that's the case, feel free to reach out informally and keep an eye out on the forum as well as our website and emails for any new information around the launch. We are excitedly getting ready for it. And as we learn more, we will communicate more to you, and working together, we'll get this off the ground. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good day, and we'll see some of you soon, I suppose.